So Father's Day is this weekend, and of course, one of the stories making the rounds right now is about how three dads invested $250 each to start a runaway success of a company that has now sold $35 million in ball caps. In an article dated June 17th, 2026 from Entrpreneur.com, the lead reads, Bart Zanayuski, Grant Easty, and E.J. O'Donnell didn't set out to start a big business, but their quick friendship and overlapping interests led to one that just celebrated its 4th anniversary, the apparel and lifestyle brand Dad Gang. End quote. The article deals with how these three dads, annoyed with all the cheesy dad merchandise out there, decided to make a streetwear brand that was positive and encouraging rather than jokey. And so they pooled their money to invest in a small production run of 100 hats and sold out immediately. Now, they're a huge success now, 4 years later, and the story makes it seem like they reached their current standing effortlessly. And you know what? Good for them. I think it's a neat story to read, and I'm really glad they found success with their brand. But if you read the article, you will notice a few things. First of all three of these gentlemen knew each other and had backgrounds in product marketing and apparel before Dad Gang. 2 of them had worked together managing a t-shirt brand, and the other was a printer who made stickers for big brands like Nike. So this wasn't their first business venture. They all knew the lay of the land and how to produce and market products because they all had experience doing it. Second, they didn't go directly from selling 100 hats to $35 million valuation overnight. They say in the article that they sold their first run of hats to people they personally knew. And in fact, they also mentioned what encouraged them to print more was the fact that they were able to sell them to that audience. Other business ventures that they'd attempted hadn't even cleared that hurdle. And it still took time for their apparel to catch on so that strangers would buy it. And that leads to the third point. Dad Gang had and still has a very active social media presence, starting with Instagram and eventually including TikTok and X. This allowed the trio to instill a culture and philosophy behind their brand and also to capitalize on sightings of celebrities wearing Dad Gang apparel to broaden the appeal of their own apparel line. And the fourth point is that the founders largely understood their brand was $35 hats. And that's mostly what allowed them to make $35 million over 4 years. It wasn't even until their 3rd year that they began exploring retail partnerships. And they also explain in the article that they've put money back into the company to ensure that it can grow sustainably. And finally, the 5th point is important. The trio had an entrepreneurial mindset and cite as an influence Gary Vaynerchuk, a famous serial entrepreneur and author whose ideas inspired Dad Gang to be their best. Vaynerchuk just recently signed on as their strategic advisor and partner. So, you got a brand that's grown tremendously in 4 years, sure, but it wasn't a runaway success or a foregone conclusion. It took a foundation of entrepreneurship for things to get here. And then a lot of emphasis on community building, a clear brand message, sustainable growth, and careful partnerships. Now, I mention all of this because I almost daily see articles about how someone started a cottage business and now they're a huge success because of it. The subtext is almost always, hey, anybody can do this. But when I dig into these articles, though, I almost always see the same story. Someone who's really savvy at marketing, recognizing an opportunity that they were uniquely situated to see, putting in the hard work to capitalize on it, and then reaping the rewards. So let's talk about entrepreneurship and why marketing is such an important part of finding success, and why starting a business is rarely something that's going to result in being successful overnight. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this is the Marketing Gateway. Entrepreneurs are a special breed of person, generally willing to spot new opportunities, take big risks, and put in lots of time and energy into creating something that didn't exist before. One common critique of entrepreneurs is that they're good at starting things and building a lot of hype, but then often have to step out of the way for business-minded people to scale things past a startup mentality. And it's worth mentioning that according to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, only 50% of new businesses make it past their 5th year, and only 30% make it past their 10th. Now, I do want to be careful here and say that not all of these businesses have failed per se. There could be a lot of reasons why businesses decide to go out of business, but even so, we all see businesses fail all the time. And I think it's a pretty good rule of thumb that if you're starting a business, your chances of success or failure over 5 years are essentially a coin flip. I've talked about this in an earlier episode regarding the restaurant business, and I'll say it here too. No one starts a business intending to fail, but the problem is that if you want to succeed, you have to have more than good intentions, because making a sustainable amount of money as a business is actually a really hard thing to do. And here's a case in point. The entrepreneurs you see on the television show Shark Tank. Now, the people who go on Shark Tank are generally entrepreneurs who are actual functioning businesses who are at the startup stage and they're looking to scale. And those who appear on the show are actually just a tiny percentage of the tens of thousands who apply. Around 99% of the people who apply never make it on, which means you're seeing a very highly curated group of entrepreneurs every season. And you're only seeing really the most entertaining parts of their pitch session, which take an average of 45 minutes, but which sometimes go way longer. While the show portrays those who are able to obtain a deal from one of the sharks as surefire success stories, the truth is that only about half the deals that are made on the show are actually closed in real life. And even among those highly selected businesses that appear on the show, there's about a 63% survival rate, or 70% if you include rebrands and acquisitions. Now, I bring all of this up because if even the people who are getting national publicity on Shark Tank are struggling and destined to failure at least a third of the time, it points to just how hard it is to launch a company that see it succeed past those first few years. Well, why is this? The number one reason, and this is something any business school professor will tell you, is cash flow. Running out of money is an absolute killer because it means you can't continue to fund operations and your creditors are probably going to call their loans. A lot of people go into business without a realistic understanding of what they need to start with or how much money they can put back in. And as a small business association consultant once cautioned me as I was prepping to start a business, which, by the way, I ultimately did not proceed with starting, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. Banks have a different logic when it comes to money than entrepreneurs do. You know what? It's so true. But beyond that, many of the other problems have to do with aspects related to marketing. And this is where I'd like to spend a little bit of our time. Entrepreneurs need more than just a product to be successful. They need to have an understanding of who wants it, how much they're willing to pay for it, and if they can produce it inexpensively enough to make any money on it. That requires either an intuitive, practical, or academic understanding of marketing, and entrepreneurs are often at their best when they are able to tap into those skills and figure out how to craft a pitch that will appeal to their target market. So let's go back to Dad Gang for a second, the company that I talked about at the top of the episode. The trio behind that company has an understanding of the apparel market because they've participated in it before, trying out new ideas and even being willing to take a risk to see if their concepts have any legs. The article I shared said they each invested $250 to get Dad Gang off the ground, but in truth, they've invested a significant amount of time and money and sweat equity in previous ventures first. The guys behind Dad Gang also figured out a target market that they wanted to appeal to, dads, but they didn't pick that group arbitrarily. They picked them because they're part of that subculture and they understand it. They recognize that the group is large enough to market products to. There's about 70 million dads in the United States alone and billions around the world. But also, those dads are not being served by products that represent fatherhood as a serious lifestyle with a positive community and encouraging vibe, but rather you see a lot of products with a kitschy, jokey topic centered around topics like sports, fishing, barbecuing, golfing, mowing the lawn, or drinking beer. So the Dad Gang group engaged this target market of dads with a grassroots social media campaign that grew their audience organically and allowed for a B2C pull strategy rather than pushing products out into the supply chain in the hope that people would buy them. One might argue that their real secret sauce behind their success is not the product itself, but the way they've built a community around it and created a lifestyle apparel brand to signal membership and affinity in the community. The Dad Gang guys also recognize that growing their company requires reinvesting their profits and scaling up before trying to go too big with their concept. From how it appears in the article, they seem savvy about investment and partnerships, and they were deliberate about selecting a partner with a proven track record whose ideas they trust. Now, right off the bat, these sound like the markings of a successful company. Real-world know-how with good market insights are a powerful combination, and they need to be at the foundation of any successful business. The next step after that is to develop a product offering, and this is where a lot of entrepreneurs fail because they often want to develop the product first and then figure out who their target audience is once they've got it to sell. If you're the sort of person who's inclined to do that, my suggestion would be to either develop ideas for sale to companies that are good at marketing but who need new products to sell, or go find yourself a marketing partner because your chances of success without a strong marketing foundation are very slim. Now, Dad Gang, by contrast, developed a product that sells and then they stuck with it, even including their Designed by Dads tagline on the product to showcase their understanding of the target market. 80% of their products are hats because that's the concept the market is ready and willing to support. And even though the article says they're constantly texting each other with new ideas, they seem to have some discipline in their approach. They're building retail relationships carefully so they don't push out a bunch of product that won't sell. And they're also looking for opportunities to connect conspicuous consumption of their products, like celebrities wearing their hats, to their broader community of dads. And again, these are all marketing decisions, applying the same sorts of tactics you'd learn in an undergraduate marketing class. And pretty much every time I read a story about a successful entrepreneur who has grown a cottage business into a mid-sized one, this pattern holds. They start off learning about the product category in the market. They develop a strong understanding about how to engage the audience that they want to sell their products to, and they begin building inroads early. They test their products and find concepts that the market really responds to. They scale up carefully and sustainably, reinvesting in themselves, and they stay focused on the foothold that they have in the market, using the lessons they've learned to capitalize on the opportunity they've uncovered and have the discipline not to branch out until other opportunities present themselves. And that is the secret to successful entrepreneurship. Now, incidentally, I mentioned I decided not to pursue my own small business nearly 20 years ago. So here's what happened. I was working in the comic book industry before I was working at RPG, where I work today, and I saw an opportunity for educational graphic novels aimed at children. And so I spent time talking to kids and learned that they appreciate nature themes and also that they were intensely curious about who would win in a fight if two animals crossed paths. Now, at the time, there weren't a lot of graphic novels for kids, and school libraries were really hungry for them, so there was a market for them. I worked with an artist and developed a concept that was called Code of the Wild that would pit a wolf and a wolverine against each other and teach facts about both animals in the meantime. I wrote up a business plan, got the main comic book distributor to agree to carry the book, and started seeking funding. And unfortunately, that's where it stopped, because the one thing I didn't have available was financing. And even with my experience and know-how and appetite for risk, I didn't have the collateral or the spare cash to acquire the funds needed to print, warehouse, and distribute my book. Would it have been successful? Well, there was another author named Jerry Pallotta, and he's produced over 30 books through Scholastic called Who Would Win? And they're sort of like my concept, though his lacked the narrative and the comic book style art that my concept had. Those books, though, have been hugely successful, and I think that they tapped a lot of the same ideas. Also, graphic fiction for kids is a huge market now. My own kids have entire bookshelves full of graphic novels, almost none of them involving superhero stories from companies like Marvel or DC. So you know what? I had the right idea. I had the right understanding of the market. I had the right business plan. I had the right experience. I had the right timing. I had pretty much everything, but what I lacked was the funding to capitalize on all of that. Now today, I could totally invest that money in myself and take a risk. But nearly 20 years ago, I lacked the one thing entrepreneurs must have: enough money to build a foundation for a business. And in 2008, we didn't have Kickstarter or crowdfunding available to help a creator out. Heck, we didn't even have Shark Tank. Not that I would have made it on TV with a small idea like this to begin with, but hey, the very real chance of taking a coin flip on myself and risking everything on an idea I might not have been able to sustain would have been devastating to me. And so I got out while I still had some money left, And while I do regret my failure to launch, I don't regret the course my life took instead. And that's the other problem with entrepreneurship. We often hear the success stories, but not the quiet failures that also happen every day. And I don't want to discourage any would-be entrepreneurs from trying. You know what? Get out there and get the world excited about what you've got to offer. Just remember to do your marketing homework first. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this has been the Marketing Gateway. See you next time. So our plug this month is for animal welfare and rescue. And I'm not going to mention any one particular organization as a place that I want you to designate your attention, because there are so many that are in need. And whether you have a local animal shelter or humane society or a place that's doing trap and release or anything along those lines, there's always a need to donate to help support the care and rehabilitation of animals in your area. One group that I do like to donate to is Stray Rescue of St. Louis. They are very well regarded in terms of their reputation. They have a 90% score on Charity Navigator, and they do a great job of getting to know the animals within, especially the urban areas, that have been abused or neglected or just set loose. I've gotten loose from careless owners or things like that. And they help these animals to begin to trust humans again and to find forever homes. And I respect and admire their mission so much. But there are many other animal groups out there as well that are looking after and caring for animals that have been discarded. Now, I want to say I'm an animal lover, and there are many cats and dogs and other adoptable pets out there that people get with great intentions. You know, when they're puppies or kittens, they're cute, right? They're fun to have, but they can't care for them properly. And instead of trying to find a good forever home for these pets, they'll go out and they'll drop them off in the woods, or they'll just kind of let them go loose in their neighborhood or things like that. And this almost always is one of the worst things you can do for these animals, because they wind up coming back to where humans are living because they're dependent on humans for food. They get in fights with other pets. They get in fights with wildlife. They get hit by cars. A lot of bad things can happen. And the people that are out there watching for these animals, caring for them, having compassion for them, are people that I respect and admire like you wouldn't believe. So again, I want you to take some time, research your local animal welfare organizations in your area, and be sure to give, because especially during the summer, these animals are threatened like you wouldn't believe by the heat and by just all the additional activity that's going on. And so anything you can do to help will make sure that these animals get another chance at a great life.